Pat, it's such a delight to be here with you today. Tell me a little bit about these and what they're supposed to do, then we'll move forward.
These bells, obviously, come from India, and the sound, you'll hear a sound, and then you'll hear it go away. So in teaching mental training meditation, which is currently what I'm doing, the idea that you're very solid like the sound, but you're also very unsolid like the distancing of the sound. So it's a beginning of that idea, but also it just quiets the mind down as well when you begin to follow the bells.
Yeah. Wow, what a lovely way to get started. Well, let's see. We would love to start with you telling us about your growing up years, and we're going to go way back to Minnesota, to the cold country, and find out about your growing up years and your family, and how you ended up becoming the child you were and moving forward. So if you could just share with us Minnesota, and we'll move from there.
And before I do that, I want to thank you, Sharon, for this invitation, because it's wonderful. I've written several books, and I've been interviewed by my books, but not about who I am.
No.
So this is really lovely. Thank you.
It's time.
Yeah, wow. It's been a long time. I was born in Duluth, Minnesota, but my parents lived in Twig. Can you believe that? Twig had to be population of 10.
Twig, Minnesota.
Twig, Minnesota. And we were on the Miller Trunk Highway. I always thought that was absolutely fascinating. I only lived there till I was 7, but it really set the stage for living in the country, because I lived in Twig. I lived in the woods. And my father had the lumber company, my grandfather had the grocery store, and that was right on the Miller Trunk Highway, and that was it. And our houses, and maybe a barbershop and a tavern, and that was it. So that was the basis. I felt that I was, as a child, really the opportunity just to be with my sister and my parents and my grandparents, because there wasn't anybody else. I went to a one-room schoolhouse with all grades. I mean, think of that now. It's pretty unusual. But there came a time when my mother said, I cannot stand the cold anymore. It's either me or Minnesota. And she said, I want to move to California, where her family was, her mother and father and sisters.
She had grown up in California.
No, she'd grown in Colorado.
Oh.
But they had all moved to Los Angeles. So that's what we did. We got in the car one day. I remember telling my father, how do you know to get there? You know, well, you have a map. A map? Who ever heard of a map? Because all I remember was being in the woods, because I would be in the woods all summer, and in the winter we'd just be tobogganing and skiing down all the hills that were around us. So it was a very outdoors life. It was a lovely beginning. And then we moved to Los Angeles and eventually moved to Northern California, where I really went to elementary school, finished elementary school in San Leandro, and junior high and high school. So.
And in growing up in those areas, was that during the 50s?
Wow, was it during the 50s? Well, it was, yes. I graduated from high school in 55. So
were you, what were you doing? Were you dancing the twist, and did you like Elvis Presley?
Oh my gosh, how do you remember all that? I remember loving to dance. I loved drama. I wasn't much of a athlete, but I was always singing somewhere and always in some play and doing that kind of thing. And very social. I was very much a part of the school politics. But you know, what I have done, when I went to college then, I went to UOP, and then I went to USC. And I went to USC in a program which was at that time in four-year college, which was dental hygiene.
Mm-hmm.
And it was right at the very beginning of the profession.
Mm-hmm.
So they really pulled in incredible, primarily women. I think there were only women, and there were 40 women in our class. Outstanding women. We had academics, as well as political, as well as the queen of the, whatever that, what is the queen of homecoming?
Oh, yes.
We had that in our class. Just amazing women. Well, these women, these 40 women, have met every 5 years for the last 50 years.
Wow.
So yeah, I think that has taken me away from high school.
Yes.
So we look at each other, we all come together, we're all 74. And I meet with them as often as I can to go down the Bay when I go down to Los Angeles, because most of them have stayed in the Southern California area.
Mm-hmm.
But what an amazing experience to watch our lives. Some have died, some of our women have died, but mostly our husbands have died.
Mm-hmm.
What women are doing now.
Yeah. They're just transforming themselves, and that's what I love about your story as well, is that there's no destination. You just keep on growing, and you keep on learning. And so you went into the dental hygiene field for a while, and then you ended up teaching it.
Yeah, I went into dental hygiene for a while, married a dentist, and we both went into practice, and then that marriage ended. But I still practiced dental hygiene in San Francisco, and I realized I didn't like it. I really did not enjoy cleaning teeth. But I love the idea of teaching.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a position at the University of Hawaii.
Oh, fun.
And I spent a year teaching there. And in fact, there's a woman here in Nevada City that was a student there right before I came in to teach. So we knew each other. And then I came back and taught at Foothill College for 15 years. So 15 years of really an incredible amount of time to put together a whole idea of how do you really begin to teach the way you learn. I began to realize I had no idea how I learned. And how do the students learn? So how do I teach them? Mm-hmm. So I went back to school and got my master's degree in psychology, and I did a whole, I did my thesis on how does one learn according to the brain. This was in the 1980. Around that time, 1980, when the brain, just right brain, left brain, had started coming out. Mm-hmm. And I began to realize that I really didn't want to teach people. I wanted to teach people how they learned. Mm-hmm. So I created a program called Learning How to Learn at Foothill College, where all the students had to take my class before they went on, before they graduated. Mm-hmm. So I had people there 19 to 70. Wow. People, all kinds of different learning styles, and they began to understand their learning style, and so they could go on and really learn the way they learned much more efficiently. Mm-hmm. That was very exciting for me.
That is so key in learning is to know how you learn.
Well, how do you learn? And so there was a man at Sunnyvale who heard of my program and asked me to come in and work with the whole city of Sunnyvale, all the officials, all the people that work at City of Sunnyvale. So I spent 2 years working with the City of Sunnyvale, teaching all of them how they learned. Yeah, that was wonderful.
Was that very rewarding?
It was remarkable to work with the police and then work with the attorney and to work with the city manager and all these people and all their peers I worked with. And then at that time, I had another husband who was my current husband, and we started working together and we created a consulting company together with that. Yeah.
And so that you married your current husband, David, who I just met, and remarked that the two of you look like bookends. You look so good together.
And we met at Foothill College as colleagues.
Yes,
So we
and
knew a lot of things.
what a lovely couple you make, and
Thank you.
just so important to have a good life partner.
We have. We've had a wonderful life together. It's going on 30-some years now.
30 years, well, it's remarkable, I think, that anybody lasts more than a couple of years. So 30 years, that I think that there's something going on that is more than just God's grace.
And we actually are still working together as consultants. We've just spent 2 or 3 days in the Bay Area working with an executive. So David and I are putting our talents together, where he does all the business and I work with their inner life. So it's a wonderful experience. We really, I really feel like we've made a difference in a lot of people's lives.
Well, I am so happy for you that you have such a good mate, and that you both are able to work and grow and function professionally
together.
and personally together.
And we say together, I mean, retire? How could we retire? This is absolutely fun.
Yes.
You know, bringing the elder back into people's lives. I think most of the woman we worked with this last week was in her middle 50s, but a lot of executives we work with are in their 40s.
Yes.
So it's like we're really giving back to what we've learned in the past. That's very meaningful.
Would like you to share, I know you've written several books, you mentioned that, and one of the books that you wrote is called When Sleeping Beauty Wakes Up, and could you tell me how you came about writing this book?
That was a big event. Once David and I were married, we moved to Nevada City. And I was not ready to sell the house that I had built on my own when I was single. But my Prince Charming wanted to move. So I moved, and you'll see, if you read this book, you'll see that a lot of times when women do what somebody else wants them to do, they begin to resist. And I resisted so much that I got chronic fatigue. I got chronic fatigue when chronic fatigue wasn't even called chronic fatigue, it was a yuppie disease. And no one knew how to fix me.
That was before they knew what it was all about.
That was in the late 80s.
And initially they just thought it was in your head.
Right. It was, you were crazy. So I went to a variety of physicians here, and I would call them and say, these are my symptoms. They say, lady, we don't know what to do for you. Except there was one physician here in town that said, I can give you B12 shots, but let me tell you, I don't know what's going on with you. I do know that because your emotions are so awry that your husband needs to go into therapy in order to hold this. And if we hadn't done that, like most chronic fatigue people, we wouldn't have had a marriage. It's a real tough ride. There was a physician in Sacramento, and I got 3 phone calls saying, this man could help you. And he did. He did. It was almost like he injected oxygen in my system and vitamins and minerals, and in 3 weeks I was up walking and feeling much better. And when I got better, 9 months later, the FDA closed his clinic. I was blessed because when that happened, I decided I wanted to give back, and I wrote the book called When Sleeping Beauty Wakes Up. It's a book that's very important with anyone that has any kind of chronic illness.
Yes, it says a woman's tale of the healing of the immune system and awakening the feminine.
So any kind of immune issues. I interviewed professional women to find out about their immune system.
A lot of research went into that.
A lot of research.
Yes.
That book triggered my real interest in meditation because I had been in such a meditative state. I was asleep for 3 years, falling asleep all the time. Couldn't get out of bed. I was always tired and went to sleep. Tired when I woke up. And when I woke up and wrote this book, I realized there was more to understand about my inner life. So I went into 3 months of meditation in Massachusetts. And when I came out of there, I realized that I wasn't done. And so the next year I went in again when they held the 3-month meditation retreat. It was with 100 people from all over the world where you meditated for 15 hours a day. And you did that from 4 in the morning till 9 at night, and in total silence. And I remember sitting on a park bench in the park that was right around the area thinking, oh my God, for the first time I've actually felt my heart. I actually feel that I feel loving myself. And I've just done that all by myself in total silence. I only saw a teacher 1 time a week for 10 minutes, and that was it. And then about 3 years later, I realized that I still wasn't done, so I went in for 6 months. And I was in the state of Washington at a Buddhist retreat center, and I was in a little trailer, and I saw no one, I talked to no one, and I was in silence for 6 months. And at that time, I called what I call it, I fell into the gap. And it's a place inside us that we all have that is so peaceful that you can't even describe it in words. I just kept walking around my trailer and outside, and I couldn't believe this incredible peace that you fall through what isn't all these objects in the world, but it's that space, between our breath. It's a space between our heartbeat, and you just fall into this incredible, amazing peace and happiness. So I said to myself, how in the world can I translate this out into the world? No one's going to sit in silence by themselves for so long. How can I do that? And so that was my thesis when I got out of my retreat. How do I do this? Well, 2 years later, all of a sudden, I don't know how it occurred, but I found this EEG machine.
Oh, yes.
That it was a brain machine that I could put electrodes on my head, and I could begin to see my brain waves, how I meditated. Was I meditating? What happened when I fell into the gap? What happens when I'm stressed? What happens when I'm angry? And I can see that. The brain waves will show you that. They'll show if they're amplified. They'll show which configuration they're in. I was absolutely fascinated with this machine.
So it was like the language of your brain.
It was.
All of a sudden you had a factual something you could connect with what was happening.
Absolutely. I mean, this is revolutionary. You begin to see your own thoughts, your own emotions running through your brain. I feel them, but I didn't know what was going on in my head or my body. So I started putting David on and the kids and putting friends on, and I began to have a practice.
And you've just written and published a book that's called Heal Your Mind, Rewire Your Brain, and this is the accompanying CDs that come with it. And this is going into this information that you discovered with going into the EKG machine.
Absolutely.
And all of the work that you did on that. You've gone quite around the globe, I don't know around the globe, but maybe on promoting this product, this wonderful, I've read some of the book and I started listening to this, but I'm saving it for, I have to go to the Bay Area today, and I'm going to be listening to this tomorrow when I can have peace and quiet and my computer's not running and my telephone's not buzzing.
Ringing.
Yes.
So I look at each brainwave and I use a meditation for each brainwave, and I put it on binaural beats. So when you listen to my meditation, you're actually getting into the frequency of the brain. And each frequency, these 4 frequencies, are busy, and then they go down into a very still, quiet place. Every person should be in that quiet place every day, because it not only heals the body and rewires the brain, but it also repairs cells and regenerates the body. Very important to the healing process.
So in learning about the brain and the power of meditation, what did you learn personally the importance of that meditation for you. It did bring you into that place of peace that you'd never felt before. Is that what is the profound thing that you learned from meditation?
Oh boy. The most important thing is that every single person has a quiet place inside them. I'll say place, but and that's the place that's home. So I said, when I came out of my retreat, I had found home base. Home is not out here. Home is inside. This moves and changes, it ages, it dies, but there is a place that witnesses everything that goes on out here. That's home. And in my meditations, I begin to teach you to find that, to know the mind maps and know the landmark in order to get to the place that really unlocks or takes you out of this prison that we're in of emotions and the mind running so fast. The mind begins to stop. There's a quiet place. And that's home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that has been so meaningful to you. I mean, that
Absolutely.
has been your life quest.
Oh, that's absolutely it. Yeah.
Right.
And to teach others. So to give this back.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the idea of the book, the workshops. I've been on lots of radio and TV in order to share this with others.
This story of yours is so inspiring. You also actually are in the Audacious Aging book, along with many folks.
Deepak Chopra.
Yes,
Yeah.
Deepak, and let's see.
Andrew Weil is in there. And gosh, I've kind of forgotten now, but I have a chapter where I talk about, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could, as a community, maybe in your business or in organizations, create these circles of mental training. So we begin to learn how to manage our minds. You see, the problem is that most of us are in a lot of stress in this world.
Yes.
And by beginning to train those emotions, you begin to live a happier and wealthier and
More content.
life. Yeah.
Yes.
Great.
You were mentioning in talking about heal your mind, rewire your brain, that one of the main reasons that you decided to write this and put this out there is because of the prevalence of stress in our everyday life these days. Do you want to share some of that with me?
Yeah, Sharon, I was just so amazed when I started doing research on the brain and the mind. And then I looked at the remarkable stress we have, the people that have to leave work because of an illness. And I guess what really did it was when I was doing compassionate care for the church I was in, and I went to hospice to learn what is the process of dealing with groups of compassionate care, grief groups and so forth. There was a man there whose wife had died, and they'd been together for 60 years. And when we got to his turn, everybody talks about their turn of what's going on in their lives in terms of death of loved ones, and he started crying, just like a baby would cry. Just
Sobbing.
Oh my gosh. And I realized that man has no place else to go but to this outside world. He's lost the woman that he'd been with forever, and he had no inner world or own inner refuge to go to. So that stress that comes about through all kinds of death and old age and
Job loss, divorce,
all these things. How do we manage this mind that will terrorize you? There is they call it the default system. The science calls it a default system where these thoughts are running through all the time. And unless you begin to manage these thoughts, they will take over. And they're finding now, they're finding out that if these thoughts continue, it creates PTSD, OCD, eating disorders, all these different things, because it's the wrong voice to listen to.
Yes.
So what is the right voice? What is the right one to attend to? And that's what I do in my meditation classes. Yeah. Begin to train the mind to know which place, what are the qualities, what are the mind maps that I call it, the landmarks to follow within your own mind, rather than these thoughts that blister through. And the more stressed you are, the faster and more intense they go.
So
Interesting process.
it is, and it basically is helping the people that you work with make better choices
Make better
on
decisions.
knowing what decision to make on something, because their mind is pulling them in different directions. There's the way they should go, and then there's the way that the brain is pulling them probably towards addictions or behaviors that are compulsive or whatever that
That's right.
is causing
right.
more stress and more of a breakdown of their systems.
So they
that's
say
so
out of
important.
five thoughts that you may have, 3 of them are negative.
Yeah.
From this default system.